Good morning, everyone. My name is William Berg. I'm president of the board of the directors of Preservation Sacramento. We're a 501c4 nonprofit and a citywide historic preservation advocacy organization. This is our spring 2022 Preservation Roundtable, and welcome to everyone who's attending and presenting today. Just briefly, our agenda. We'll begin with just a brief welcome and some updates on what Preservation Sacramento is doing. Then we'll hear from City of Sacramento Preservation Update, and Henry is here to give us an update about the City of Sacramento Preservation Department's latest activities. And then we will hear about the Jefferson block with representatives from Cresleigh Homes and Page and Turnbull, followed by a brief update regarding the Capitol Annex from our board member, Karen Jacques. If there's a word to associate with our activities this spring, it's delay. There have been there's really exciting things in the works, but a lot of them are going a little more slowly than anticipated. We're still working on our survey of the Richmond Grove Historic District, and the consultant is putting the finishing touches on it, but we've had some timetable delays, and we'll hopefully have more to tell you soon, as well as including a walking tour of Richmond Grove to introduce people to the neighborhood and to familiarize people who live in the neighborhood with what being a historic district is or can be, and the benefits and what it means. The other delays we're experiencing is in many ways in some cases, some scheduling conflicts have delayed most, if not all, of our Jane Jacobs walks this spring. And we're still going to be holding more walks and tours in the summer, but they won't necessarily be part of the Jane Jacobs Preservation Month events that we've traditionally done pre-2020. We're still kind of finding our land legs and getting used to doing in-person events, so there will be more coming, but it's going to take a while. Another project that we've started on, and in part it was spurred because of some of our public outreach regarding the Asian American contexts of the Richmond Grove Historic District, is we're just starting work with Sacramento's Japanese American Citizens League and some other business associations on writing a California Historical Landmark nomination for Sacramento's lost Japantown. And many of you might be familiar with California Historical Landmarks. They're the bronze plaques with the bear on them. There are only about 1,000 in the entire state of California, and they are used to commemorate California history and significant events, and often for sites and places where there is no longer a thing there. Though you put a plaque to talk about what was lost, what historic events took place here, where there isn't necessarily a sign. In the case of Sacramento's lost neighborhoods, the West End, our Japantown, our Chinatown, there isn't necessarily physical markers or physical signs other than a handful of buildings such as the Nisei VFW Hall at 4th and O Street. So we're working on writing the historic context for a landmark nomination for later this year, and so it will accompany the actual historic district, Richmond Grove, which is further south. And that, of course, was the neighborhood of exodus where people moved from the West End to new neighborhoods and started again. But we wanted to commemorate what was lost as well. Henry will talk more about this, I think, shortly, but Preservation Sacramento is partnering with the City of Sacramento's Preservation Office to apply for an African American Experience Grant, which will supplement other grants used to identify historic contexts and sites related to the history of African Americans in Sacramento. And we'll hope to have more information on that in the coming weeks and months. And like I said, I think Henry will have a little bit of update on it. But we're providing both a couple members of our board to work on the grant application, and we're also fiscally sponsoring the grant. We're providing some funds to match the proposed grant amount. And another thing, there's some other exciting news I hope to pass along, but we are moving forward with a hybrid historic home tour that will happen on September 18th. It will be both virtual and in person. So we will have a number of virtual only tours that ticket holders will be able to view online, and we're hoping to make them on demand rather than a scheduled presentation like a Zoom meeting. So people can just go view them at any point for a period of a couple of weeks. And then we'll also have in-person live historic home tours. We're still working out the exact locations. We hope to have more to tell you in the coming months, but we're just getting started. We're really excited to be able to do this. A lot depends, of course, on being able to do so safely, and hopefully we'll know more. State Capitol is one of 8 most endangered places in Sacramento that we talked about at our meeting 6 months ago. But we're going to talk more about it later. But for now, I'd like to welcome Henry. Like have you go ahead and turn your camera on and join us for your part of the presentation if you're here.
It's just saying that I can't start my video because of
okay, hold on. Let me see if I can help with that. Oh gosh, I've had this happen before, and so. Oh gosh. All right. Here's a question for anyone on the meeting who can type into the chat and can remember how to allow presenters to turn on their screen.
All right, good morning, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Henry Feuss. I am the preservation planner for the city. Sean could not be with us today. He's on a weekend away with his family and visiting his mother. So I will be giving up the updates for what we're up to. So to kind of piggyback off what Bill was just talking about, so I'll start with our African American Experience Project. So we did the grant scoring about 2 weeks, I'm sorry, the proposal scoring about two or 3 weeks ago. And I'm not sure if our partner is going to be raised public knowledge yet, so I won't say just yet. But we are anticipating having a partner kickoff meeting probably in the next month or so. And that will likely be held in Oak Park, and the details on that will be more to come. So this project's going to be much more ramping up very soon. So we'll have a lot more to say in the next coming months. And also Bill mentioned that we are looking to increase our mission of what this project is start trying to do with advanced social equity and for African American experience in the city. So we are also seeking a supplemental grant from the National Trust to assist in compensating like prominent Black community members to compensate them for their time and experience, and this way we can. There was some concern that we were expecting people to work for free for a lot of work, so it's absolutely the right thing to do. So we are looking to partner with Preservation Sacramento and the National Trust to increase this funding and provide stipends to the community members. We are also, as for landmark nominations, we are processing 2 of them currently. We have the Stark Saucerman House landmark nomination. So that just went for passed for publication before City Council this past Tuesday, and then the nomination will be processed and presented before City Council on May 24th. We also have 424th Avenue, which is a building that is kind of on a large parcel in Southland Park that is a kind of an agricultural building. We're kind of not really sure about the entire history of it, but it is going to be known as the CG Hidden House, and that will be presented before the Preservation Commission on May 18th next week. We are also looking for, right now we have 2 postings for interns we're looking for that are going to assist on the African American Experience Project and to increase our abilities with the Eichler district nomination process for the summer. So those are both due on Monday. And then we also have on May 24th, the objective design standards going before City Council for SB 35 projects. That is Sean's project. So if anybody has any questions on that, that would definitely be more to direct towards him. I think that is all we have for today. If anybody has any questions, I can take those or.
Okay. Henry, you might maybe try turning your camera on now. I changed the setting. We'll see if it works.
It still says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Oh gosh.
It's okay. I'm done. So.
Okay. Well, are there any questions from attendees for the city? You can either raise your hand. Okay, Catherine, I will go ahead and let you go ahead and switch you on as a panelist so you can speak. Go turn your microphone.
So I see a question in the chat is, what is the address of the first landmark nomination? That is 2911 Riverside Boulevard. And it is the Leonard Stark's house, that he was a prominent architect in Sacramento.
Okay, am I unmuted? Yes. Okay,
yes.
Henry, thanks for being here and answering questions. I had a question about an article I just saw in the Business Journal about the bank on 10th Street, designed by Henry Devine, and the proposal to build a hotel on top of that structure.
Do you? What is the address of the property?
1011 10th Street. I think I got right. It is Art Deco structure, famous for the murals inside as well, for its interior.
Oh yes, right by the Citizen Hotel. I'm aware of that.
Yeah,
I haven't seen an application come in for that. I could be mistaken, but
it's not on the development tracker site yet.
Yeah, so until we see that come in or have any meetings with the applicants to discuss that. I know there's been talks of that before, but I haven't seen any applications recently come in for that project.
Thank you.
All right. And next question is from Bruce Marwick. Bruce, you should be able to talk now.
I was just going to follow up on Catherine's question, because that's a building, given my interest through the Art Deco Society. So we'll just wait to hear when the proposal comes into the preservation office.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, thank you, Henry, and we will continue the program.
All right, thanks for having me.
Okay, thanks. And there may be some other questions. Let me see if there's any other attendees with their hands up. Okay, Bruce, I'll have you go ahead and lower your hand. I'll lower your hand. We'll continue. The California State Capitol is one of the 8 properties that were listed on our most endangered, and the fountain, as many people know from some of our updates, is scheduled to be rehabbed as part of the rehab of the adjacent building, but Karen will fill you in on the current situation with the Capitol Annex. Another of our most endangered were California's business boulevards, including Del Paso. And one update that we have is that several residents of North Sacramento have joined Preservation Sacramento with the intent of protecting historic properties in North Sacramento. So places like Wood Lake and Del Paso Heights, Del Paso Boulevard itself, Old North Sacramento, and Dixie Ann, some of the other neighborhoods, which are over a century old, but there really aren't any city landmarks, only a handful of identified landmarks, such as the 670 Dixie Ann School, recently listed in the National Register. And so that subcommittee, which includes both members of the board and Preservation Sacramento members in North Sacramento, will be working on identifying ways to locate and survey and protect buildings in North Sacramento and identify the stories behind them, the historic contexts. and that's also continuing. We're a little further back, but there are also residents of the neighborhoods along Stockton Boulevard, Colonial Heights, for example, who are interested in doing the same sort of thing in that direction. So citywide, we're reaching out to people throughout the city, and so in some cases, we're still working with the Central City projects and the oldest parts of the city, but many of the so-called newer parts of the city are well over a century old. Speaking of some of those projects in the Central City, the Fainted Ladies of 21st Street. If any of you have been by 21st Street between Powerhouse Alley and Q Street in the past couple of months, you'll notice that these buildings look a lot different. The siding has been removed, and there's a whole lot of work going on. Part of that is mitigation of dry rot and other damage to the buildings over the years as part of their conversion to fourplexes, and these are are listed historic buildings, so they will be rehabbed. The exteriors will look pretty much the same as they did pre-rehab, but they will each be a fourplex with a large shared backyard connecting all three buildings. So some people, I think, they saw the work being done, and assumed that was demolition in progress. It's actually rehabilitation in progress, which can often look very, very ugly before it gets pretty again. But it looks like we're making progress on that particular historic building. Marshall School, unfortunately, not a whole lot of progress to report there. The item was considered by there was originally a proposal years ago to convert the building to residential by Catherine Bardis and David Mogavero, and the district did agree to update negotiations and continue negotiations to have it happen, but it hasn't happened yet. So there's other happier news about another school that hopefully we'll be hearing about shortly. Alleys in Sacramento. We don't have a whole lot of update regarding alley policy, but one of the interests that people identified was many of Sacramento's alleys look like old country lanes, and when they're paved and improved, it changes some of the vibe there. And what can be done because obviously there is a continuing need for housing and more intensive use of our alleys. So how do we maintain these as friendly places to be? And sometimes eyes on the street help, but how do we maintain them? The Sacramento B building, it's still kind of in flux, and we haven't heard too much about the B building itself. One piece of news that did come in, we're hoping to find out more, is one of the owner of the B complex, the whole area around the Sacramento B, subdivided it into 4 different parcels, and one of them has been purchased, a warehouse at 22nd and S Street for use as a multi-restaurant, essentially an industrial kitchen that would allow delivery-only restaurants to operate from this building. It's got a parking area in back closer to our street, so it's a little bit separated from the neighborhood. But it sounds like that'd be a really good example of adaptive reuse, the kind of thing we're hoping for the B building itself, someone to come in and put a new use into an old building. The Southland Park neighborhoods were another resource that was discussed and considered threatened when we discussed it 6 months ago. The Sacramento Register nomination for the Southland Park, for the Eichlers in Southland Park Hills, is moving forward and getting ready to go through the city process. And our board member and friends at SacMod are also working on protections for the Sacramento Zoo entrance, as of course, as many of you know, there's potentially a change in location for the Sacramento Zoo, but that also spurs the question, like with these other buildings, like the Sacramento B building, if the use that justified creation of these structures is gone, what new use could they have? What new use could that land have? And there's been a few discussions about that. And let's see, there's a couple questions in the Q&A or in the chat. Let me see if I can. Though the Fainted Ladies project, it's the same family that have owned the building for decades, the Henry family, and they have been working with the city of Sacramento for the past couple of years to secure permits and funding and everything to rehab those buildings instead of demolishing them, and so that's actually moving forward. And Bruce, I see you put your hand back up, and you still have permission to talk. So if you have another question, feel free to. You have the floor.
If I did it inadvertently, and
Oh.
I will hit the hand down again.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on. We talked a little bit about the Jefferson School, or I'm sorry, or about the Marshall School, and I briefly mentioned the Dixie Ann School in North Sacramento. But the other school that we're going to have as our featured presentation today is the Jefferson School. This is also a Sacramento landmark, also listed in the National Register of Historic Places as a result of a grant by the Capital City Preservation Trust. And it's been the ownership of Cresleigh Homes for quite a few years now. And there's a proposal coming forward. It's very similar to one that was proposed about a decade ago. But I will let the team from Cresleigh take it away and just do a screen share. And you can discuss what's going forth. And I apologize for the non-functionality of cameras. We had this happen the last time. We just changed over our Zoom account from my personal Zoom account to a Preservation Sacramento sponsored one, and so we're having a few technical difficulties. But with the screen share, we should be able to see what's going on with. Okay. Okay, and then let's see. We have a mic issue. Okay, Dina, I don't see that you have a microphone at all. And I don't see you on the list of attendees. So I can't unmute your mic because there's no mic to unmute. So I know we heard you earlier, but I'm not sure what's happening now. Okay. Okay. And Dina, I do not see your number anywhere. I do not see any number anywhere as being on the meeting. Okay, let me see if I can.
Bill, can you hear me now? It looks
Yes,
like you
I
just
can.
hit a button to allow me to speak. It was saying the host hadn't disabled mics.
Okay.
So perfect. So Jonathan, I'm presuming that you actually have the screen. And so I appreciate that. First, thank you all for having us. I know, as Bill, indicated at the beginning of his, kind of introduction, it's been a number of years Cresleigh has owned this site. It's kind of through the bravery of the Sac City School District in their belief in us. It's taken a number of years as we were focused on a few other projects, but we're so pleased to be turning our attention to Jefferson School. As Bill indicated, the school is listed on the National Registry, and we're pleased to show you our full presentation and our full block design for both Jefferson School and for both appendages and both intersections. And so next slide, Jonathan. Next slide, Jonathan.
Which slide is it on right now?
It's on the introduction. It's on the very first slide. I don't know. Go to slide 2. Yeah. There you go. Perfect. This is just a little bit about Cresleigh. We are actually celebrating our 31st year this year. Our origin story is in single family residential, but over a number of years, we have built multifamily, mixed use. We have a number of projects going on in the Bay Area and also a high rise in downtown San Diego. And our sister company is actually a hotel company. So we work on a variety of projects. As the second paragraph indicates, we've spent and deployed probably at this point more than $1 billion in land acquisition and construction of residential throughout California, Texas, and Arizona. And really, I think part of the hallmark for Cresleigh, and as I said at the beginning, part of what I think is so inspiring is, we typically try to not only work with public agencies, but where we can, we try to really focus development in close proximity to job centers, because we're very, very much focused on the idea of the pedestrian experience. And so you'll see that kind of coming through in our design is and how proximate and how close we are to the state capitol. So we're thrilled to show you the remainder of our project. And I'm joined this morning by who I consider to kind of be the all-stars of Sacramento in design. And so we have Claire Flynn with Page and Turnbull. We have Ryan Townsend with LPS, and we have Mark Groen with VGA Architects. So I think Claire, slide 2 or slide 3 is you to talk about the historical context. Oh, this is a little bit more about Cresleigh, kind of a little bit redundant, but we typically also, just so everyone knows, we typically retain ownership of all of our developments. I've been here, gosh, I was thinking about it this morning, 18 years. And in 18 years, I think we've sold one project. And so we build things for the long term to hold them and to maintain them. And so we think about the building all the way from the inside, from the MEP, and how we're going to be able to manage it long term. So it's an asset both for ourselves and certainly for the community. Next slide. And so at this point, Claire, maybe you can take over the remainder of the slides and kind of talk about the context of Jefferson School and our project and kind of how we reside in Sacramento.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay. Hi, everybody. As Dina said, my name is Claire Flynn, and I'm a cultural resources planner, and I work for Page and Turnbull here in Sacramento. And we were brought on by Cresleigh a few years ago to provide them some additional historic consultation on this project. And a lot of that had to do with identifying character-defining features and helping to determine significant spaces as well to inform this project. So I'm just going to give you a really quick historic summary of the history of the building and its significance, and then I'll let other members of the team talk about the project. So the building we're talking about was originally built as the Thomas Jefferson Elementary School in 1921. And the building was designed as part of a really ambitious school building program that the Sacramento School District embarked upon in the early 20th century. And that school building program was really a response to some enormous growth that the city of Sacramento was experiencing at this time. One of the things that happened in this period here in the early 1900s is that the city annexed a large amount of new territory into its boundaries in 1911. So at that time, a bunch of neighborhoods joined the city, including East Sacramento, Oak Park, Land Park, Curtis Park, a few others. So the city's size really grew rapidly, and that meant that the school district had a lot of new families and students that they needed to service. So these conversations about building a bunch of new schools for the city began in the teens, but World War I happened and it stalled the school building program for a few years. And then it picked up again in the 1920s after the war ended and the economy was, back up and roaring. So in 1920, the school district created the Architectural and Engineering Commission specifically to complete this school building program for the city. And the program resulted in one new junior college, one new high school, and 6 new elementary schools, and also rebuilt and remodeled a bunch of older schools that already existed. So back to the Jefferson School. The Jefferson School, as I said, was built in 1921. It was one of the early schools that was completed as part of this program. And the school replaced a much earlier building that had been completed in 1870, which at the time was the oldest school in Sacramento. So the new Jefferson School building, the one that exists today, was much larger than the old school. It had more windows that could provide light and ventilation to the students, and it also had additional outdoor space for playgrounds. And the building had a pretty interesting history during World War II. It also served as a distribution center for sugar rations. And the building ceased being used as a school in 1949. At that time, the Sacramento School District converted it into its administrative offices. And as part of that work to convert it to office use, the entire interior of the building was gutted and a couple of additions were added to the building. So there's one at the east side that's kind of a one-story addition with a flat roof. And then there's a two-story addition at the north side of the building as well. Next slide, please. So the design of the building is an example of a Tudor revival style building. And it was designed by two architects who are considered master architects. The first is E.C. Hemmings of the firm Hemmings, Peterson, Hudnut Incorporated. And the second is James Dean of the firm Dean & Dean. And it's a little bit of a convoluted story about how these two gentlemen were involved with this building, but in a nutshell, E.C. Hemmings was the chairman of the school district's Architectural and Engineering Commission, and he formed this firm, Hemmings, Peterson, and Hudnut, specifically to complete this school building program for the school district. And at some point, kind of early on in this school building program, in the early 1920s, he decided he wanted to be released from the contract, and James Dean then took it over. And James Dean was, oh, I can maybe share my video, let's see. Hey, there I am. Hey, everybody. James Dean was a really logical person to take this program over because prior to this, he had already been working as a draftsman for Hemmings Peterson Hudnut Incorporated. And so he had already been involved with the design and development of many of these schools. And so when he took over, he created his own firm, Dean & Dean, with his brother Charles. And both of these men, E.C. Hemmings and Dean & Dean, are well known for a lot of buildings in Sacramento and the surrounding area. So some of the buildings E.C. Hemmings is known for is the Elks Building, which is one of my personal favorites in Sacramento. The Folsom State Prison, San Quentin Prison, and then some buildings at San Diego State University and San Jose State University. And then Dean & Dean has designed a lot of buildings you're probably very familiar with, including the Memorial Auditorium, the Sutter Club, the Westminster Presbyterian Church, the Sacramento Produce Terminal, and the J.C. Carley House in Curtis Park. Next slide, please. As Dina mentioned, the Jefferson School is a historic building. It is a historic resource. It was listed as a local Sacramento City landmark in 1982. And then in 2020, it was also listed on the National Register and the California Register, specifically for its architecture. It's considered a wonderful example of a Tudor revival school and as an excellent example of the Sacramento School District's distinctive architectural program of the 1920s. And so I've included some diagrams here on the right-hand side. These are some examples of the significance diagrams that we created for Cresleigh to help inform their project. And basically the purpose of these diagrams is to show areas and features of the building that are considered to be historic and really important to retain, and then those that are less historic or not considered historic. So as you can see in these, the parts that are in red are the kind of highest historic significance, and that's the exterior of the building, because that is what conveys its Tudor revival design, the fact that it's a school that was built in the 20s as part of this program. The interior quarters are in green because they're just slightly less significant than those exteriors. And then the blue is the parts that are not considered historic. And in this case, it's specifically because the interiors were gutted, as I said, in the 1940s. And then there's those blue additions that were added also in the 1940s. And then I saw there's a question about who did the nomination, and it was Kara Brunzel. And that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay. To speakers, okay, let me, you not only should you be able to unmute, you should be able to turn on your video.
Great, I think, there we go. Can everyone hear me, I think? Yeah. Thanks, Claire. That's a fascinating history for a great building and a great area of the city that hopefully now is going to be restored and refurbished, and that energy and life will be apparent again on N Street. So my name's Mark Gruen. I'm with Verlacus Gruen Architects. We're about a block and a half actually from this project. So we've seen it over the years slowly dissipate and in much need of a restoration. And so the fact that it's going forward and we get to participate is an honor, and we're thankful that Cresleigh is moving forward with this. I'll give you a kind of a brief overview of the proposal, the project that's looking to happen. The existing school building is about 10,000 square foot of floor. It's 2 stories. It's looking to be completely restored. And as part of that, and maybe I'll focus on the interior before I get to the exterior, but some discussion points of, as part of it being looking to be committed to an office use, maybe stay back one, Jonathan, if you could. As a part of it is being a part of an office tenant use, it's not necessarily going to be one office tenant. It would be, could be into multiple. And so with that, there would be a main entry lobby, an elevator, and restrooms that serve. So it's a lobby that serves multiple tenants if that's the way it goes. And those restrooms and lobby would take place off the main entry of the school, which you see here in that back in the main courtyard where it always has been. And there's it would have access to both floors, and it would provide possible bike and locker room facilities as well for those tenants who choose to bike. So it's really meant to change the entire floor plans to open it up to the windows that you see on the exterior facade and really bring light on into the interior of these incredible, what will be incredible interior spaces. Maybe Jonathan, go one back, because I think they're one from Claire's slide that I thought was interesting. And it's the green area, which are the areas of secondary significance. We're looking to preserve and maintain that corridor for the new tenants as part of the circulation for the space. And you can see on both the left and right side of the floor plans, there are 2 stairwells, stairs that have been there for since the beginning of the school creation. And we'd be looking to enhance but maintain those stairways for use. And they're beautiful, and I'll show you a couple of slides in a minute of what they are. But also along that corridor, it's kind of interesting. There's been talk, and again, it's just some certain things that you pull from the past. There's drinking, you know, there's an old ceramic drinking fountain, probably from the 20s or when it was originally built. Maybe that's something in that hall or corridor that gets preserved or listed in some way. There's an old radiator along that side. Maybe those get highlighted some way. So there's lots of fun potential to kind of remember the original function of this building inside, and of course, as well as outside. So maybe we go down again, one more slide, Jonathan. Yep. And on the exterior, one more down. Let's go to the interior shots now. Thanks. So the upper, this is the existing building as it exists today. The upper slides are kind of exterior. The lower are the interior. The lower right is one of the corridors that you can kind of see. That drinking fountain to the right there in the lower right, that's not the one I'm talking about. That's a modern one. But the radiator, and then down toward the end is another tile and drinking fountain area that could be interesting. Then in the bottom middle is one of the stairs, and you can see just to the right that curvilinear wood cap and sort of column, half column that supports the banister, and then the stairs themselves with the windows. What beautiful things to look at on each side once you're in your open office space and are looking to either go upstairs or downstairs. And the hope is you remember that these halls were once run by the children and the teachers and can experience that in some way. On the upper middle slide, which is sort of what we're calling the main courtyard and main approach to the building, you see the flagpole to the left, and there's a kiosk kind of marker. I don't know if you can quite see it here, but the flagpole is meant to be maintained as well. I think that's one of the original ones. And then on the left and right sides of that photo are some of the alley shots of the new, some of those 1950 editions where we're planning to keep the one on the right and utilize that in the plan. The one on the left is slated to be removed, which not the gable end, but the far concrete end that was put on in the 50s. You do also see the materials here that we are looking to restore, and those are key for the project. The tile roof, the cement plaster walls, and of course the brick, the beautiful brick base, and some of those Gladiac beam tile at that little entry toward the in the main courtyard there, and the windows, of course, too. And there you see in the middle slide, the left and right, those windows to be refurbished and let light in on both sides of the building. Should be quite a space. All right, maybe we go one more down, and you can kind of get a picture. Oh, and then the other, one more key part is this idea of plazas and the experience of the user, both the public at N Street, which is at the lower end of the drawing there on the left, and then the user of the building, the tenants. So a series of courtyards and plazas has been provided. First and foremost is the restoration of the original playground, play yard for those students in the middle there that you see. And some of the elements that were there are kind of that flagstone, almost paving pattern on the approach and the axis there, that looking to be maintained in some way, restored. Landscaping, the existing little brick wall that separates the courtyard from the street, all meant to remain and function, maybe this as both an entry courtyard and maybe as a tenant use, a little more private court for patrons and tenants. And then as you go a little bit south of that, you see there's another full plaza that stretches from east to west, left to right on the site. That is more of a semi-public, semi-private plaza that's separated from the main public sidewalk by landscaping and another very low wall that kind of just gives you a hint of you're transitioning into another space. This could be a plaza for tables and chairs, for bikes, for people to sit and experience. The flagpole would be out here, and some of the other elements to kind of get right up close to the school edge. And then on the left, which would be the plaza between the school building and the new multi-story building to the west, which Ryan will talk about in a minute. That plaza is also kind of a multi-use plaza, both likely probably for the tenants to be able to go out there and either meet and or have a break or that kind of thing. You can see the little crisscross pattern is meant to provide lighting of some sort that string lights that go across the plaza. And we see that all of these plazas as being sort of this view from N Street on the public sidewalk as intrigue and uniqueness, and brings a sort of an energy and just an appreciation for the building that they surround. So there's a couple of others buildings on the site. And so as we maybe go one more, Jonathan, if you could. So this is kind of the full view where it kind of shows the historic school. It shows the sort of the plazas and the transitions from the sidewalk to the intermediate to the original main court, shows the flagpole. One other sort of element that's outstanding and notable is the tenants on the buildings from both floors really didn't have much of a view of the street presence or of N Street, which is what you see here. And so as part of the renovation, we're incorporating these sort of modern glass and steel. They're not really towers, although sometimes they're referred to as that. It's more, I mean, they're almost like lanterns or just window opportunities for the tenants in the building to experience and view the courtyards below and the street life happening around it. And so we see these as being quite interesting and adding a freshness to that facade. And you can see at night that those could glow and light up and provide sort of highlight as people drive by as well. Then to the right is what's being proposed as townhomes. It's a lower scale to the east. And so these are residential units that would step down in height. And then to the west is the multi-story building along the much busier 16th Street. Maybe one more, next slide, Jonathan. Here's another view kind of looking at it from N Street and 17th. Again, looking to incorporate a brick that's similar to the historic, but not in any way meant to replicate it or try to give a sense of false historicism, but more a contemporary way of how we use brick. But it steps and matches in texture and matches in heights, and seeks to kind of pull back and highlight the building in the middle of the school. These are 7 individual townhouses with porches to 17th Street, stoops and walk-ups, and then balconies. Potential for, maybe next slide, Jonathan, if you could, potential for some roof deck options if that's, if chosen. But otherwise 3-story, 2.5 bedroom, 3-bedroom units, main living spaces on the ground, on the 2nd floor. And you can see some large patio balconies that extend out from the living area. And the corner unit has a little more of a live-work unit facing N Street, and another entry there. So it could either be a secondary living unit, or it could be an office space for the tenant or for the homeowner. So it offers some options there as well. And it, as you see, steps down in a sense to give reference to the school building beyond. I think that's it on our side. I do see alley tenant access and garages, great question on there. And these homeowners here each have their own car garage with a shared drive down off the alley, and it would have a gate, so it wouldn't be used, but it would just be for the homeowners. And then the parking has some minimal stalls, but I know, and maybe Cresleigh may speak to this further, or Ryan may, some shared parking ideas with the multi-story building, which will have parking garages. Entrance doors for the townhouse are on 17th Street, and they'd have little stoops and little step brick patios there as well at the ground level. And no lot line, 0 lot line needs to be separated by 6 inches of space with a cap. So that concludes sort of our involvement with it. And again, we're excited for the whole project and can't wait to see energy elevated along this spot, which has been quiet for a long time, or lacking for a long time. So I'll turn it over to Ryan at this point.
Hey everyone, so I was just able to unmute. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the building to the west on the site, so the existing vacant lot. So just really just talking about what's going in there. So this is going to be 101 units total. It's 8 stories, and it has 2 levels of parking, as Mark mentioned. One is half below grade, and a total of 39 spaces that can be used for both the school and the tenants, or the office building and the tenants. The access to that is going to be off of the alleyway. And on the ground level, as Dina was mentioning, it was really important to us to maintain an active street presence. So we have our lobby entrance and the main entry to the building located on the corner of 16th and N, and obviously a higher storefront at that location. And I think you'll notice from the overall, maybe I'll go wait for the next slide to talk about the character of the building. But as far as the overall character, we're keeping with the rest of the site in terms of the material palette. And one of the nice things about the existing school is just how simple and refined the architecture is in terms of the balance between the lighter portion above and the brick base. And then also utilizing some of those dark accents that Verlocus Groen has put into the architecture, and the addition of some of those elements, that the lantern element that Mark was mentioning on the front. So we started to pick up on some of that character and language throughout the mid-rise building. But one of the other unique features, as you can see in this image, is that we've actually stepped the building back along that green space between the 2 buildings, so that it can allow more light into that space and create more of an opening and a separation between those buildings. But what we really wanted to do is make sure that we maintain the height of the new urban corridor going down 16th Street. So it's 85 feet tall. So it's very similar to the Aviva, and actually a little bit lower than the adjacent office buildings. And go to the next slide. So this is a view from the corner of 16th and N, looking east. So you can see on the top portion of the project, we've also utilized that to accent the the corner and one of the main amenity spaces above, which would be a lobby space on the top with a roof terrace above that, and really taking advantage of some of the views. From the roof terrace, you'll actually be able to see the dome of the Capitol, which is going to be quite nice. One of the other accents we did on the top portion of the building was utilizing a rust-colored metal to pick up on some of the cues of the terracotta roof on the existing school building. So I thought that was a nice little touch as well. It's all playing off the material colors and the palette of the existing site and doing it in a new way. And go to the next slide. So I just wanted to give a brief overview of the sort of character and the style of the building. And I'll turn it back over to Dina.
Everyone, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. So a couple of things. I thought I just provided a response. There was a question about what we purchased the site for. And Bill, I'm happy to provide you some previous business journal articles and those type of things. I did see in part of the narrative, we did trade a site that we previously owned over off of San Joaquin to the school district. It is now the central city, or it's the central kitchen for the Sac City Unified School District. Kind of brought it out of the dark ages, and it's a very contemporary location now. I think they have buses on one side, and I think on the other side is where they rehab the existing kitchen. And I think my recall is we also paid $1 million, but that transaction was, I think, 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. So I'd have to look at the actual transaction documents, or I can provide you the business journal. So happy to do that. And so additionally, Jonathan, if you don't mind going through these slides just a little bit, I just want to provide to everyone a little bit more information about other projects that Cresleigh is engaged in. This is actually a historic renovation outside of the gas lamp area of downtown San Diego. It's a tower, 439 feet, coming through a historic warehouse right outside of gas lamp. And we're going through public hearings right now. And we have had just incredible support for this building in downtown San Diego. Next slide. This is a condominium project that LPS and Ryan's team actually worked on, and we are in construction on this project in Campbell, in kind of a historic downtown area of Campbell. And you can see how this building kind of undulates and has a kind of a historic and a contemporary theme on both sides of the building. And that project should be occupied in 23. Next slide. This is 171 apartments with a condominium map in Napa. We are also under construction on this site now. We just started the clubhouse here. So my expectation is we take our first occupancies probably June of next year. Next slide. And here is a hub project. I think I said at the beginning, part of what's really important to us is proximity of jobs and the ability to be able to walk to employment and walk to services. This is actually a suburban, kind of urban suburban project. We purchased this property actually from Intel. It's directly across the street from the city of Folsom's largest employer. People that both live here, and we built some homes on the other side of the intersection, can walk to work. Intel has actually, in the past, has actually rented some of these units for folks that are coming in and out of town. There's a grocery store directly behind here. So it's very proximate. And this kind of, you see a theme through a lot of our projects, and also what we hope for 16th and N is that this revitalized an area for Folsom that was long neglected. And so I think you see how much attention this architecture team in Cresleigh has paid, trying to find the rhythm for Jefferson and for 16th and N. We're intensifying at 16th, and we're trying to soften the interface for these townhomes that DGA has designed on the 17th side. And, I'm a firm believer, kind of a, planning background, those type of things, that schools and what Jefferson meant, over a long span of time in downtown, can be very thematic for its next life. And so my hope is it becomes kind of a collection point, that it's a place that people can walk to, and that it invigorates more areas, and that the historic renovation is honored. And that's our full intention with it being nationally listed. So we're pleased to answer any questions that you might have. We're just so thrilled to finally be here. And just to give everybody just kind of a high level as we're going through the process with the city, my expectation is probably in July or so, we have a SB 330 application. We'd be through the planning process and the city process. We have both the architecture teams working through to get their contracts in place, and we are interviewing general contractors for the apartments and for Jefferson School. We would self-perform on the single or on the townhomes. And so my expectation is we start this project probably sometime in 23.
There was a question about ground floor retail. For the building that's on the 16th Street side, is the expectation that it will be strictly residential, or will there be ground floor retail in that corner in addition?
Are you talking, Bill, on the apartments?
Yes.
There won't be. And I would say that was really born out of the experience and the vacancy rate that we've seen, certainly through the pandemic. We feel like we'd just be adding insult to injury for so many of the retailers that are already struggling in that area. There's so much existing capacity. And so it was a thoughtful reason not to include, retail there. We certainly have a Viva across the street, and there's tacos, and there's nearby coffee, all of those type of things. So we purposely did not include retail here.
Maybe adding a few more customers might help the vacancy rate across the street.
That's exactly right. That's right. And so I come from a retail development background prior to being with Cresleigh, and we all know, people in the neighborhood walking and providing their wallets. Really, especially, we all see that in the pandemic. We all shop from each other, right? And so it's the mom and pops that both suffer and also can be helped by having a bit additional people living directly in their neighborhood.
And regarding the school itself, the vision is principally office use rather than commercial, or are you thinking there might be restaurant tenants on the ground floor? Or
I would tell you, the VGA team and ourselves, we all really looked at that. I think part of that kind of went back to my previous statement. I think the other side too, it's a unique opportunity. Certainly we see what's happening with office in downtown Sacramento. We're not blind to that. We think the proximity of this building and being historically renovated will have a really neat texture to the building, and the proximity to the Capitol where you can literally walk. We think the story of the building, those type of things, we feel like it can be successful even in the existing office environment.
Okay, so adapting to perhaps a changing market. And the final ground floor question, there was some mention for the townhomes on 17th Street that there was potential for ground floor offices. Although we've also seen a lot of this sort of townhomes is that the ground floor space can also be used as an ADU or a separate rental apartment. Is that the case here?
It is not. And so Mark did indicate there is one of the units that's kind of works as a live work. It's the one that's kind of the hard corner between 17th and N. And so these are, detached fee-owned units. And so we didn't design them more as live work, and also trying to be thoughtful for our neighbors directly across the street with parking and those type of things.
All right. Well, those are the questions that were in the chat. I think some others were already answered, but if anybody else on the meeting would like to either raise your hand if you'd like to speak, or type a question into the chat if you'd rather ask the question that way. All right, I'm not seeing any questions, so I'd just like to say thank you, and apologies for the difficulties, and apologies for the state of the room behind me. I'm moving, so I still have some unpacked boxes. And
no worries. Yes. I wish we didn't have so many technical difficulties today. So should you or the public have additional questions, feel free to send those to us, and we're happy to address them.
All right. Well, thanks so much for your time and for all the information. Sounds like this is something that it's been in the cards for a while. A variant on this project. It sounded, I think, as I recall, was proposed close to a decade ago, and so this it's not exactly the same. There are definitely some differences. And I did have one other question about the landscaping, and one element of the building is there's a gnomon from a sundial on the entrance, and will the sundial gnomon be retained as part of the rehab of the
You're
building?
talking about on the building?
Yes.
Yes, that will be retained.
Okay. Well, thank you, and we'll move on to our next agenda item. It was Karen, Jacques. Karen, if you were there, if you want to turn on your screen,
Yeah, I've just turned it on.
and I'll let you
So,
take the microphone and fill us in what's happening at the Capitol in the Annex.
yeah, so this is going to be my, again, update that I've been doing at every one of the Preservation Roundtable meetings. And so let me start with an update on the lawsuits. There are 4 of them being brought by 2 different groups, each bringing 2 of them, and the attorneys are for the 2 groups are collaborating on all 4 of the lawsuits. So one set of parties are Save the Capitol, Save the Trees, which is an ad hoc group that came together, as is often the case with a lawsuit like this, gave itself a name and has filed 2 of the suits, and then Save Our Capitol has filed 2 suits. And the first group of 2 lawsuits are both lawsuits over the EIR. And we think there's a really strong case. This project has been totally a moving target. The last time that the public had a chance to weigh in was on a recirculated draft EIR just before the pandemic hit. And so that was the last time any of us could make comments. The project that now exists is quite different from the project that we commented on. It's grown significantly. Designs have changed, location of things have changed. And so one of the core issues in bringing these 2 complementary EIR lawsuits is that the public is supposed to have a chance to comment and is supposed to know what we're commenting on. And that has been absolutely impossible. The design of the giant glass building that is supposed to replace the annex, it has kept growing. And it was something that didn't exist at the time of the RDEIR. The site of the parking lot moved from the south to the east, and it has kept growing. So I think it's now up to 200 cars. And then the Visitor Center, which is to the west of the Capitol, just in front of the main facade of the original historic building, has also kept growing. And it's underground, and it's under most of where the West Plaza is. It will involve the complete demolition of the West Plaza and of the set of very broad stairs that go up to the actual Capitol steps. And it will, while the front facade of the original 1860s Capitol will remain as it was, this entrance to the Visitor Center that's been sort of applied to the front and looks like it better belongs in Disneyland, will drastically change the appearance of that front facade. Also, as the Visitor Center has grown, this underground excavation looks like it's going to go right into the roots of at least 2, if not all 4 of the giant deodars that were planted when the Capitol was built. So those 2 lawsuits, the court hearing has been combined. It is set to be heard on May the 19th. It is our understanding, because people have asked whether the court will be open and people can attend, and our understanding is that that will not be possible, that it will be on Zoom, and that we will have a link to for that Zoom hearing a couple of days before. So when we have that link, I can ask Bill to forward it so that anyone who's interested could watch it. As is typical of court cases, we don't expect to have any kind of decision on that day. It may get a real sense of where it might be going, but it's very typical that that judges will take these things under advisement and then will end up writing a decision. So we don't know whether there'll be something that day or later. The next lawsuit is the pre-commitment lawsuit, and what that means, it's a sort of an offshoot of at least conceptually EIR, and what that means is you made a decision about what you were going to do before you looked at the alternatives. And so it appears, and there's a mass of evidence that no consideration was ever given to the reuse, the adaptive reuse of the historic annex, that it was decided without that it would simply be knocked down, and that this new building that has turned into this glass monster would replace it. And so that had originally had a hearing in Superior Court, and the judge had said there was some technicality, which is a non-attorney, I'm not going to try to interpret, where the judge said, oh, you can't do that. It's too late for you to bring this particular concern. And the attorney on it, the Save the Capitol, Save the Trees attorney, Susan Brandt Hawley, believes very strongly that the judge misinterpreted what could or could not be brought. And she believes that so strongly that she did an appeal, and the appeal has now been filed, was filed on the 10th, I believe, that she said she would do, and she has done, all of the legal work for that at no additional cost to Save the Capitol, Save the Trees. So we are hoping that, and what would happen is if the appellate court says, oh, yes, Judge, you did misinterpret laws here, then the judge at the Superior Court level would be told to review it in light of the appellate decision that you interpreted this wrong, and then render a decision based on the appellate court's guidelines. So we don't know what the time frame will be for that, because the court calendar is a backed up mess thanks to COVID. Then the fourth case is a case brought by Save Our Capitol that is not related to CEQA. It's related to the fact that this entire Capitol complex, the original Capitol, the Annex, and the park around it are on the National Register as historic buildings and historic park. And wherever you have a historic resource in and a situation like this with the state of California, that should be reviewed by the state historic preservation officer. DGS, which is, and let me back up, it's joint rules, and it's specifically Ken Cooley, the assembly member who's the chair of joint rules, who has brought this whole thing, pulled this whole thing together, and been the driving force behind pushing it. And then DGS, Department of General Services, has been carrying out their instructions. DGS wrote the EIR and the recirculated draft of the EIR. And they just made a decision that we're not even going to take this to the SHPO at all. So that is the grounds for the fourth lawsuit. And that was originally supposed to have been heard in Superior Court on May 3rd. And some people called about it because it was canceled at the last minute. And it wasn't anything having to do with the lawsuit. It was that the judge decided that the docket for that day was so huge that he would never get through it. So that has been rescheduled for May the 25th. And when all of this came together, the fact that this project was developed by joint rules, they also, there was legislation that created this whole thing, and the legislation allowed for either the preservation of the historic resources and their rehabilitation, or the demolition. But they also wrote in some additional things that that make it difficult. You have to do more than on a typical EIR. So as a result of some of that, we're still working on how we can get a restraining order. And we have until August before there will be any demolition of the annex. But as anyone who's been over there can see, there's demolition of the park going on, and several trees, including a huge magnolia, which was one of my favorites, has been cut down, and other trees have been boxed up for replanting, and a couple of them have been replanted, and at least one of the boxed up trees is now looking quite dead. So that's where things are with the lawsuits at this point, and we are hoping for a restraining order sooner rather than later, and certainly before, we're hoping for that before any demolition can start. One of the things that has made this so difficult is that we really don't have any preservation champions in the legislature. And I don't know how many of the legislators are really totally oblivious to this as a historic site. Back in the 70s, when the rehab of the original 1860s Capitol was done, that started out like this, with a plan to level the building and put up a high-rise tower in its place. And instead, we got a beautiful rehab of the state capitol, but that was because we had legislators who understood preservation. We had people like James Mills, who wrote the Mills Act, who came forward and said, this is not going to happen. This is a historic resource. This is one of the most important, if not the most important, historic sites in the state of California, and it's going to be preserved. And this time, we haven't had any champions like this. We've had a head of joint rules, Ken Cooley, who apparently doesn't see any historic value and has been absolutely hell-bent on getting the project, the moving target project, that has been brought forward. And would not surprise me if a lot of the members of the legislature really have no idea what this whole thing is going to look like when it's done. I suspect that some of them, if if it actually gets built, will be shocked with what they end up getting. But the lack of these kinds of champions is something that I think is a preservation organization. It's something that all of us need to be aware of, because we've had other legislation in the state that's been pro-preservation, and it's concerning not to have legislators currently that really get the value of that. And interestingly, the only place that it seems to be showing up politically at all is in a couple of the campaigns. Cooley's district has been, he has new boundaries. There are a lot more Republicans in it. He's a Democrat. The Republican challenger, Josh Hoover, is opposing the project as part of his campaign. Who knows what will happen with that? As an interesting sidelight, the Bee, which has not done much to cover the issue of the Capitol, and but they wrote an editorial saying, well, they did not endorse Cooley, and they said, well, people in that district really need to take a look at Hoover. So it'll be interesting to see if this plays out in any way in that campaign. Who knows whether it will or not. It apparently also came up in the debate that in a recent debate between Kevin McCarty for Assembly and Josh Pane, who are opposing each other. And McCarty has just viewed the Annex as hopeless and dangerous, and has not looked at it any further than that. And Pane has said that it should be saved, but again, whether it plays out in any way or gets any further publicity, that will be interesting to see. To me, the whole thing is just a tragedy. It's an assault on an incredible historic resource, and it's also at a time that we ought to be thinking about, that the legislature ought to be thinking about and being a model for dealing with climate change and dealing with sustainability. Here we are with a project that is taking out huge old trees and making the park smaller by this expanded glass building. And here we are knocking down, if it happens, if we're not able to stop it. And this fight is still very much going on, and we still hope that we will have it stopped with a lot to save. But knocking down this huge building with all this cement that is incredibly carbon intensive to make, and carting it all off to the dump, and then doing this cement and glass thing with, spending massive amounts more of resources at a time that we're into earth overshoot, and burning resources and destroying more and more habitat to extract.
Thank you, Karen.
It's a tragedy.
Yeah, thank you. We really appreciate the update, and thanks for keeping us informed on the latest.
You're very welcome, and I'll let you know, Bill, if we have a Zoom link.
All right, thank you, and we'll pass along any information that we get to our members and supporters. Before we close, I just wanted to mention Preservation Sacramento is a membership-based organization. Just looking at the attendees, I know a lot of people who are watching today are members, but if you're not, please consider joining. You can join online at preservationsacramento.org. And as a membership organization, a lot of our funding for our basic operations, just regular upkeep, comes from our membership. And then our principal fundraiser is the Historic Home Tour, which, as I mentioned, is coming up this fall. And in addition to what some of the things you've heard about today, the theme this year seems like it really is delay. Things are starting back up again, but a lot of things are taking longer. They're more complex, or there are more steps involved. for various reasons. But just because there's an obstacle doesn't mean we can't overcome it. And so a lot of these, what we've been doing is trying to get past these delays as an organization. One of the things we do is advocate for policies that make it easier and more financially viable to reuse and rehabilitate historic buildings. We're proceeding with that. We also use some of our funds to fund nominations, such as the Richmond Grove nomination. We're proceeding with that, but obviously we do not have enough funds to do a lot of nominations. A lot of that burden has to be carried by the city or by communities that are interested in nominating areas of town that frankly can afford to bankroll nominations or to subsidize them. Our other objective just is spreading the word about historic preservation. Obviously, it sounds like some of that maybe should be applied at the state level, but a lot of people who end up working in the Capitol, in the Assembly and the Senate, start out at City Hall, whether it's Sacramento City Hall or city halls throughout the state. And so educating electeds, as well as developers, as well as residents and architects about the benefits of historic preservation, which is a bipartisan issue in many ways, is another big part of our program. We do that primarily through the fun stuff, the walking tours and the talks and the presentations and the home tours that allow people to directly get into some of these historic places or walk around talking about the role they played. And another point that we try to make and re-emphasize is that historic preservation is an environmental justice issue. It's not just about the homes of the wealthy or the most expensive buildings in town. It's also about the history of communities of color and the places where these communities lived, many of which are no longer there, which is why we're talking about doing things like placing plaques for neighborhoods that no longer exist, but also providing those protections for the historic district, the historic places where communities of color are today, or where economically disadvantaged folks are today throughout the city. Because many of the benefits of historic preservation are dependent on already being listed. Things like the Historic Places Grant Program, or Historic Building Code, or the still pending state historic rehabilitation tax credit. If you aren't already a listed historic resource, you have an obstacle to taking advantage of those benefits. And by doing what we do and advocating for a full survey of the city of Sacramento and identification and listing of more resources, that's what unlocks those benefits. And because if you're a working class person, a poor person who lives in a historic building, you are entitled to the same protection as a wealthy person or a very well bankrolled business that's occupying a historic building. And in many cases, if the reason why we have these regulations is to protect those who have the least protection. Just to follow up, we had about 30 attendees in total. And the Jane Jacobs walks are going to be further out towards the end of the year, but they are happening. Another thing which has been delayed is we're still looking for a location for our June 5th Oak Park walking tour, which will include draft interpretive signage for historic sites in Oak Park related to African American history, which will include both buildings that still exist and some places where buildings no longer exist. So like the Japantown plaque, we want to have plaques and signage in Oak Park to recognize the history of those communities. So our next roundtable will be in August. And please, like I said, I encourage you to sign up for our email list if you're not on it already. Please, I hope you will sign up as a member. If you're not a member already, we're also planning the return of members-only events. We've got some pretty wild stuff lined up for this year. And there's some other news that, again, in terms of delay, some things that I can't share because the board hasn't approved them yet that I can't wait to talk about, but hopefully we'll be able to pass that along soon in an email update or a future event. So thanks everyone for attending the May 2022 Preservation Sacramento Preservation Roundtable, and have a great day.